Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jorge Alvarez, and I'll be moderating today's webinar, Inside the Regulator's Mind, How the SEC and FINRA View AI in 2025, sponsored by SurgeONE. Thank you for joining us. We know your time is valuable, and we designed this session to be clear, practical, and directly tied to the challenges compliance officers and wealth managers in general are facing right now. So our goal is that in the next 30 minutes, we will provide a grounded understanding of how regulators view AI today and what practical steps you can take to build a compliant and efficient frameworks inside your firms. I'm joined by three experts that are exceptional in compliance, regulation, and technology. First off, Mimi Legay. She's the CEO and founder of MGL Consulting, recently acquired by SurgeONE. She brings decades of regulatory expertise and has guided countless firms through SEC and FINRA exams. Hello, Mimi. Welcome.
Thank you.
We also are joined by Jeff Kern. He is a managing partner of Shepherd Mullin's New York office, where he leads securities enforcement and litigation teams. Jeff brings a unique perspective, having served in senior enforcement roles at FINRA and the NYSE, and earlier as a prosecutor. He's represented firms and executives in some of the most complex and FINRA matters. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Jorge.
And last but not least, Sidney Namandra. He's the founder and CEO of SurgeONE, and he's a pioneer in compliance tech with deep experience building scalable, integrated solutions for the wealth management space, including Intreda, which was acquired by Smarch a few years ago. Hello, Sid. Welcome.
Thank you, Jorge. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll start with an opening case that illustrates both the risks and opportunities of AI. Then we'll move through key themes, including the compliance landscape, lessons from enforcement, and practical applications. And finally, we'll close with a look ahead. So what's coming according to our points of views, and then also some audience questions. So let's dive right in. So Jeff, I remember we were discussing in a session before this some cases where AI has been used probably not the best ways in this industry. I remember you have like really good and interesting points of view there. I would love to hear those cases that you're familiar with.
Well, like the financial service industry, the legal industry is also heavily regulated. We have bar association, we have ethical rules, but we're also regulated sort of every day by the courts we appear in front of. And in 2023, our profession was rocked, so to speak, with the revelation that a lawyer in the Southern District of New York had submitted a brief that was generated by ChatGPT, and the brief contained a lot of made-up cases and false citations. And so this was revealed during the judge's examination and review of the submissions. And this is a federal judge, as I said, at the Southern District of New York. It's the most prestigious court in the federal court system. And the judge was not amused, to say the least. And what the judge did is he announced the findings that he had discovered that the cases were miscited. The attorney explained that he had used ChatGPT to generate the brief. And then the judge created a suspense thriller by saying, okay, I'm going to take this into advisement, but I'm going to levy sanctions. So I think the whole legal industry was holding its breath, or at least the litigation part of it, to see what was going to happen when the other shoe dropped. Turns out that the judge ended up taking a more, I would say, understanding and measured approach, because I think this was the first case. And he fined the lawyer $5,000 and assessed court costs and sanctioned the firm. Could have been a lot worse. It certainly served as a cautionary tale for the rest of the profession. And I think the lesson in a nutshell is, okay, this is a promising new technology, as you referred to it, but there are risks in using it. And so whatever you submit to the court, you have to stand behind it. And if you're going to submit something that is generated by AI, you've got to verify its contents, because you're going to be held responsible for it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Yeah, no, I remember that. And that is certainly what it's completely modifying the way the industry is approaching compliance, right? So there's a whole new compliance landscape with AI. And so regulators have been clear AI should enhance and not replace human judgment. What does enhance look like in practical terms for compliance teams? Who would like to start?
Mimi, you might want to.
I'm happy to. Yeah. No, I mean, ultimately, what firms that are wanting to use AI from a compliance perspective really need to make sure they have a framework in place to supervise it and to manage its use, as well as a strong vendor management program so that they can document to FINRA what systems they're using, what versions of what artificial intelligence tools are they using. For example, ChatGPT, which is an open framework, correct me if I'm wrong, Sid, or others which are closed frameworks, and how they're developing the guardrails and technology governance policies and procedures around the use of that AI. And included in that, at the most recent FINRA conference they had a couple of weeks ago, one of the major topics of conversation was making sure that any type of output that you're using, any type of documentation or procedures or responses or reports that are generated by the artificial intelligence, that you've got a framework set up in order to have that reviewed and supervised by an experienced compliance professional, not just by somebody that is a junior level staff member that really may not have the experience to understand what the nuances are of what is being generated or how to verify that what is being put out there is actually accurate. And there's not, as Jeff said, fictitious cases being cited or fictitious rules or misinterpretations being put out as being fact because it was generated by AI.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, Mimi, completely agree. AI has definitely brought a lot of possibilities in terms of, its use in a variety of cases, whether it's legal, whether it's compliance, whether it's risk management or governance. And there are a lot of AI tools out there that folks can take advantage of today. As you said, Mimi, there's a lot of open source AI frameworks that one could use, things like ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Perplexity. I mean, there are a number of these models that are now available and they do different tasks well. And then on top of this, there's this whole notion of agentic AI, where you could essentially build dedicated workers or agents, as they call them, to do specific tasks, right? And so a lot of this is huge in terms of possibility because it really cuts down on technology, workflow, and filling out forms and a lot of the inefficiencies that have existed in the prior decade. But the cautionary tale is that AI comes with a lot of hallucinations. So it is well known and well documented that any output that comes out of AI has a high degree of hallucination, depending on the use case. And so the suggestion of having supervision on any AI output or sort of have experts supervise AI or lead the AI framework is almost just as important as firms using tools out there to do the job, right? So that's sort of the paradigm we're seeing out there. Again, the analogy would be while self-driving cars and self-flying vehicles are definitely the future, I think for now you still need a driver and you still need a pilot, and that's not going away. And definitely by regulation, whether you're in the SEC and FINRA, and Mimi, you could attest to this, until such day that you see regulators finding AI bots, they're still finding people, okay, and sanctioning individuals. And so as long as the individual is being sanctioned and regulated, they're going to have to stand by any tool that they leverage.
I think you're absolutely right, Sid. And I think Jeff will agree from having been a regulator. Any tool that you use, whether it's a clearing firm system or whether it's an AI-based system, the registered individual is the one that's going to be held responsible for how it's used and the output that's being used with customers or the public. You know, if it's in the face of, for example, we see some firms creating advertising materials with AI, and they can't just put that out and say, oh, well, AI created it, therefore we're not responsible. No, the SEC and FINRA both have come out and said, no, you use it, you're responsible for it. And Jeff, your thoughts?
I look at the regulation of AI in the shadow of the regulation of crypto. I think justifiably, or the regulatory authorities, particularly the SEC, has come under fire because of the way it handled crypto. Crypto and AI are both promising technologies. They are super powerful. They're disruptive. They represent the future, not the past, the hidebound ways of doing things. And I think initially the government, again, the federal government, took a very cautious and almost fraidy cat view of crypto because they didn't know what to make of it. And so you got situations where they were over aggressive, where they're accused of regulation through enforcement and of stifling innovation. The good news with AI is I think the regulators may have learned a lesson from this, that first of all, you've got to come out of the darkness and you've got to meet new technology head on because it's not going away. And so the good news comes in the form of, I think both, if you look at the SEC and FINRA, two of the primary regulators, they have appropriately reckoned with AI. They've noted that AI is promising. For instance, FINRA specifically cited, look, AI can help investors make more informed and more efficient decisions. AI can help associated persons readily access compliance materials so that they can stay on the straight and narrow. Firms can utilize AI to bring about more efficient and more accurate surveillance. But AI comes with concerns with accuracy, privacy, bias, IP considerations, and exploitation by bad actors. To the credit of regulators, they are saying it's promising, but it's risky. And so I think, unlike with crypto, you're not seeing a lot of enforcement actions. You're not seeing a lot of finger wagging. You're not seeing a lot of doomsday proclamations. And I think this is promising.
I agree. At the FINRA conference, they were very excited about the possibilities with artificial intelligence, but they were also very cautious in wanting to make sure that they had experienced principals reviewing the output and supervising how it's used within firms. And I think that's a big part of it. But to Sid's point about the agentic AI and the bots, personally, I think that's exciting. I think the ability to leverage technology to make people's jobs more efficient and to make them be able to scale your practice, I think is huge. Whether you're a brokerage firm or an investment advisor, just to have that ability, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of add a slightly different perspective, perhaps a capitalistic perspective on this, is that we are now living in a time where the promise of technology, especially AI and blockchain, which is the technology that sort of is at the core of crypto, they promise to revolutionize the way traditional technology was ever built, right? So we are now in this very interesting space. There's almost like an arms race between countries of who's going to be more advanced in these areas. I mean, you're seeing what's happening in the chip industry, right? With NVIDIA and, with Intel and the bailout that Intel got, both from NVIDIA as well as from the government. And you're sort of seeing the sort of arms race on how do you build better semiconductors to power AI, the number of dollars that are being invested into data centers to power OpenAI, and a lot of what ChatGPT is promising to do. You're seeing just a tremendous amount of investment and optimism around that. And I think I agree with you, Jeff. I mean, the regulators are being cautious in not wanting to stymie that whole sort of focus on technology, and they're somewhat encouraging firms to leverage it, but there's this cautionary tale that the human's not out of danger here. The human is still involved. The person that makes the choice of what technology that they're adopting, they're still on the hook. And so I think over the next few years, as this technology matures, I think we have a golden opportunity to kind of leverage it. And we're certainly seeing this from customers, right? I mean, a day doesn't go by when somebody knocks on our door and says, we've made the decision as an RIA firm or as a broker dealer that we're going to use AI to run more lean, run more efficiently. We'd like to see how it could be used, right? And so that's a very positive sign for the industry.
That's
I
great.
agree.
You know what? As
Go ahead.
someone, oh, go ahead, Jorge.
No. I was going to ask a question, but if you continue with the topic, please.
Well, I think one of the ways that we can follow along what regulators are doing is look to see how many enforcement actions that they're bringing, right? Are they being petty? Are they being measured and restrained? And last year, the SEC brought an action against a couple of investment advisors because they basically bragged or made misrepresentations about their use of AI in order to select investments. One firm claimed that they were the first AI recognized first regulated AI investment advisor, like it was a first. It wasn't true. And I think the lesson there is if you want to get in trouble, that if you don't want to get in trouble, then don't be stupid. Don't do what these firms did. And I think basically they lied about this great new technology, right? Because the technology comes with a buzz. If you're an investor, you want to be able to say, I'm involved in the latest cutting edge thing, maybe down at the barbershop or the bar or the country club, right? Oh, I invested in this firm. They use AI. So these firms were easy targets. And what I would say is there aren't a lot of cases being brought by the SEC or FINRA, other regulators with respect to AI. I think it speaks well of the industry that they're not exploiting it like some bad actors did with crypto. But I also think it speaks well of the regulatory state because you're not seeing a lot of petty cases.
Yeah, actually, Jeff, you make an excellent point. I think the problem is shifting from whether firms use or should they use AI to don't flaunt using AI a bit too much without making sure you know what you're getting. So I think the problem statement is sort of shifting the industry. I agree with you 100%. And I think it's a big part of this new regime, right? Wouldn't you say that there's generally an acceptance that AI is promising, we could use it, but don't get carried away, know what you're getting, and certainly don't misrepresent the use of AI for a variety of cases. This is akin to greenwashing, right? If you claim, your fund is in some way is helping the global economy achieve its climate change targets, and then you use that as a way to be part of that whole buzz. Greenwashing was real, and there was a lot of cases that sort of came out. And so the AI washing sort of term is certainly something to watch for, which again brings me back to what Mimi said at the beginning. Vendor management, which is, let's say you document that you've got 7 vendors that you use. You're using an AI note-taking tool. You're using AI to do supervision of your e-communications. You're using AI to do marketing review, using AI to do risk management. Understanding how they use AI, is the data private? Is their environment secure? Do they have any certifications? Do they meet certain frameworks? So there is a NIST framework called the RMF, the Risk Management Framework for AI. Do they pass that? Do they subscribe to the Responsible AI framework? These are all things that I think the goalpost is shifting from should I use AI to, yep, we're using AI. But if you're going to use AI, document what you're using it for, and make sure it meets a certain risk threshold that you can explain.
Well, and Sid, to add to that, what we're seeing on the exam side from the regulators is them asking those questions specifically of the firms. How are you using AI? Are you using it to create advertising? Are you using it for surveillance purposes? Are you using it as part of your email reviews or part of your other activities within your compliance department? And if so, how are you supervising it? What are the procedures you put in place around it for guardrails? But then also, how are you training your staff? And what policies do you have in place for what AI tools are permitted to be used, and how are you monitoring to make sure your people are not using unapproved AI solutions, much like the off-channel communications reviews were done. So we're seeing the same pattern, but now overlaying that to artificial intelligence. So the challenge firms are having that we're seeing is it's hard to know when you've got a broker that's working from home 2 states over or 3 counties over, whatever. Is he using ChatGPT to help draft an email, sales email to one of his clients or to a report? How do you monitor for that? And those are some of the questions that FINRA is asking, or the SEC is asking. How are you making sure they're not putting a client's information out into the public domain through ChatGPT, as opposed to, say, using a closed source AI tool to generate those reports? And I think that's a challenge that firms are going to have, especially your independent broker platforms or independent RIA platforms.
Yeah, this is such a valid point. I mean, in my prior life when I was at Intrada, we spent a lot of time trying to solve the problem of, if you're a broker dealer and you've got independent reps and everyone had their own devices and they were working from the house, how do you know that those devices that they're using to conduct business meet a certain cybersecurity risk threshold that meets your?
Right.
Well, now, again, the goalpost has changed. People are using AI workloads. Somebody's using ChatGPT, someone's using Claude. Many of them might be exfilling company data and sending it to those systems and using it to generate briefs or summary reports or what have you. What risk does that pose to the parent? And so I think the challenge for the industry is, if you're going to be in charge of compliance and you're going to be in charge of surveillance, knowing what's actually happening with your field force, what are they using, what tools, and what policies do you institute without being overly draconian and blocking everybody from not doing that, because AI does promise to offer a lot of use, but knowing what you know.
Well, and do you have a tool, if you will, that can go out and sweep your infrastructure or your enterprise, system to figure out, okay, which people are using which tools?
Right.
And are those tools approved from a vendor standpoint? Has compliance done the vendor due diligence on that tool? And has that tool been approved for use by the firm, and in what capacity? So again, that goes back to, you really can't just look at one piece without putting them both together. The vendor side along with how your compliance program around the AI.
One of the things, putting my regulator hat back on for a moment, we're talking about disruption, we're talking about change and technology. But one of the things that doesn't change is the regulator mindset. So even if you have new technology, a regulator is still going to make a decision based upon like a traditional matrix. And where I'm going with this is this. If you're looking for a litmus test about, hey, should I adopt AI? Should I change my procedures, surveillance, compliance, whatever? One question to ask yourself is a question the regulator is going to ask if something goes wrong. Did you adopt this in a way that operated, that you abdicated your responsibility as a regulated entity? Because that's what a regulator is going to look at. They're going to go back to the human side of things. Did someone make a decision that was negligent or reckless or just ill-advised? So you don't want to put in AI. You do want to leverage the efficiency of AI, but you don't want to look lazy doing it, right? If you're going to implement AI in a system, it's okay that it saves you time, but it doesn't relieve you from the responsibilities you have to make sure it's right. So if you find yourself in a situation where this is too good to be true, that you think you're just pushing a button, sitting back and letting a non-human agency do your job, that's when you might be in trouble.
I agree. And what concerns me is when you see firms racing out there to adopt the technology as quickly as possible without really looking at it and understanding what's involved. I mean, we saw that during the pandemic as firms moved to a remote working environment, and all of a sudden they were adopting new technology like Teams and Zoom, and there were unintended consequences to that they didn't really think through. For example, record keeping requirements. Same thing with the AI. If you're using AI for something, that becomes part of your record keeping obligations. So again, you've got to think through each of the components to what's involved in adopting that technology and how does it impact your supervisory systems, your record keeping systems, your vendor due diligence programs, and then on a day-to-day basis, who's going to supervise it? You can't just throw it out there and say, well, everybody's using it, so we're just going to use it and not supervise it. You can't do that.
You know, this is the analogy that comes to my mind is my kids using ChatGPT to do their homework, and then they submit it as part of their book report. And then the school teacher is looking at the book report going, was there sufficient interaction between the kid and ChatGPT in this case to critique it, to add value to it? And so the two things that come to mind here. First off, schools are adopting technology where they can actually check and tell you that, yep, this was generated by AI and not necessarily by the kid. Okay, so that's one. It'll be interesting to see what's happening on the regulatory side because we know that many of the regulators are using AI to process ADVs or look at any of their submissions to catch issues, right? So that part of it is happening.
FINRA and the SEC both are using AI.
That's correct. So it's a reality, right? So they are using AI to catch deficiencies. Now, I think to your point, Jeff, and to your point, Mimi, the big thing that the student could do in this analogy would be to capture the logs of how they're interacting. What were the questions that they were asking? How did it respond? How did they critique it? How did they process it? And I think that audit log, that human AI interaction, where it's okay to use AI as the new scientific calculator to kind of give you some results, but it's how you drive it. It's how how you frame the question. How did you break down the problem? And I think the detail that goes into that interaction, I think is going to be equally important. So the industry, I think, is going to morph from should I use AI to, yep, everyone's using AI. We're using it to catch you. We're using AI to make our life easier. But it's how you sort of capture that log that doesn't absolve you, to your point, Jeff, from responsibility and provide that transaction record if you were asked or as part of your submission, I think is going to become key.
I think you're right. I think if you go back to it and think about from the standpoint of how is a firm using it, once they ask the question, one, is the question a valid question? Or do they know enough about the subject to ask the appropriate question of the AI, if you will, as opposed to, the old garbage in, garbage out type concept. But by the same token, once you get that information from the AI, then what do you do with it and how do you use it? And Jeff, I know from a litigation standpoint and a regulatory standpoint, that's often a question the regulators ask is, okay, once you got this, what did you do with it next? And how did you apply it, or how did you take that information and make decisions based on that information? So if you're pulling something out of ChatGPT and you're not looking at it carefully and you're not knowing, you don't have the experience to know whether or not it's giving you bad information or not, but then you act upon that information and you put it out in front of the invested public, I think there's a huge concern from the regulator's perspective. And from the plaintiff's bar's perspective too.
Yeah, Mimi, one additional point here. The analogy that comes to my mind, from my NSA cybersecurity days, is if you had a cyber insurance claim, let's say somebody's laptop got breached, okay, and you submitted a claim that your laptop got infiltrated, and you submitted a claim. What does the insurance company do? The insurance company will look for evidence that at the point that your machine got fried or got taken over by malware, what condition was it in? And there's actually standards for this. So it's forensically collected standards that one could use in the courts. And Jeff, you might have some thoughts on this, where, it's not, and it's similar to sort of the Worm Act, right? If what was the status of the data at that point? Was it tampered with? So the tamper-proofness of the data set is probably going to become an important consideration if you sort of fast forward going forward, right? It's you interacted with AI at the point that you interacted with AI and a certain result was drawn. What were the questions that were asked? How did you prompt it? How did you then respond? What does that transaction record look like? Who approved it? How many people approved it? At what date and time? Was the approval done after the result came out, or did you approve something and then AI changed it? All of that needs to be documented, and it needs to be in a place that can't be tampered with and then be submitted. So I think the industry is certainly headed in that direction.
And I think too, Sid, to add to that, they're going to ask, what were the qualifications of the person that was doing the reviews? And what type of training or experience did they have to know that the output, whether it was accurate or not, before they approved its use?
Excellent point. Yes.
Great. So we've been talking a lot about how all this technology is evolving, how it's becoming much more advanced, how the regulators are looking at it. But how do we see this from the perspective of the audience? So if you're a larger RIA, you're going to have more resources to implement, do your due diligence, understand the vendors, all that. But when we're going down market to RIAs that are much smaller that may not have big teams and all that, what advice would you give them to navigate the current situation between their obligations and the technology can be helpful to them? How should they approach this shift?
Cautiously and measured. Because again, if you're a small firm, you don't have the bandwidth to make the mistakes, if you will. So you really don't want to just jump in with both feet. You want to think about it. How are we going to use it? What are we going to use it for? What type of procedures do we need to put in place around it? And do your due diligence on the vendor that you're going to be using. And also query your existing vendors to find out which one of your vendors are using AI now, because that's another thing that you're going to be asked by the regulators is, have you found out which one of your vendors are using artificial intelligence? And you may not know they are.
Yeah, look, any whether it's a broker-dealer or an RIA, if you've chosen a small business model, you've done so with the knowledge that your margin of error is smaller than that of a big firm, right? You have to be efficient. There's a premium on making good choices on who you hire, what you invest in, what real estate you lease, right? So this is no different. So Mimi's words, cautiously and measuredly, they really carry the day.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I think these days a lot of firms, especially the smaller firms, are extremely attracted to the new economics that some of these AI tools are able to present, right? So in the past, you could hire a consultant and pay them on an hourly basis, or you would spend a lot of money to contract out a particular project. Now you've got some of these AI companies coming in and claiming they can do the same job for half the price or a third of the price. And the smaller the firm, you think, okay, great, I can cut my overhead by 30%, 60%, what have you. But that's not true, right? So that is not true at all, because yes, if you were to just use a tool and replace a human with the tool, that argument may fly, but you're going to run into potentially some of the issues we talked about. You might run into issues where you're now going to rely on a tool to tell you things that somebody now has to validate, which means you're now spending your time to do that. And the firm that's giving it to you has probably got terms and conditions that say, we're just a tool company. Use our suggestions at your own risk, because they're not going to sign up. Yes, they're not going to sign up for any liability on that. So you're taking that liability, you're assuming that, and you better know that that's what's happening, right? So, in my opinion, the leveraging peer groups to understand talking to experts out there that have used technologies out there, that's a good source to get unbiased opinion. Talk to your peers, go to your business groups, go to roundtables, talk to the experts and ask them, hey, I'm thinking about using a certain note-taking tool. What are the tools that you're using? Why did you choose them? Yeah, they're claiming they're using AI. So do that. I think that's a good first step. Second step is that doesn't replace your own diligence. Devil's in the details, right? You have to go into the process to really understand. And there's a lot of templates out there, right, that one could use to kind of get a sense of, what questions to ask of the vendors. Is your data secure? Who owns the data? Is it my data? Is it your data? Are you sharing my data with other firms? What kind of AI frameworks are they using? Do you call OpenAI? You have a back door to OpenAI, which means my data is now sitting in OpenAI servers. Or am I using OpenAI within my data center, which means I'm on the hook, right? So these are all questions that you should ask. What security protocols do you have in place? Who has access to this? But then last but not the least, this is my favorite one, which is if given a choice, and if you only had to do one thing, always go with an expert-led AI solution. Don't go with just an AI tool. Go with a solution provider that can provide human oversight with tools, and you get the bundle. Because
I agree.
you now have the ability to call a person and say, I don't agree with your findings, or I don't agree with your suggestion, but now you got a person that you can hold accountable. And so I think the human AI bundle, and it may cost you a little bit more than just purely AI, right? But I think the human AI bundle is where I think the industry should be today.
I think you're right, Sid, because I think too, you've got to have that human piece has got to be experienced in your industry too, in order to be able to bring that valued oversight for you. If you're going to want to try and outsource some of the, I won't say responsibility, but some of the oversight functions to someone on that AI side so that you as a small business owner have time to service your customers, you want to know that whoever's looking over that AI output is experienced in your industry and understands what your regulatory framework is, what your regulators are looking for, and what your firm's obligations are, both from a compliance as well as a record keeping perspective. We have a small firm that contacted us recently that they were having their junior staff use ChatGPT and Copilot for note taking, right?
Yep.
The Copilot
Yes.
note taker.
Yes.
And the notes that their junior staff were having done, they were saving it just in random OneDrives. Okay. And those OneDrives were for the individuals that were with the firm, but there was no central record keeping. There was no central depository for those notes, those meeting notes that were being created. So no principal was reviewing those meeting notes. And once we started looking at it, the Copilot didn't necessarily always accurately attribute conversations to the right person, or it didn't necessarily understand the context of what was being discussed. And so in those note takers, the notes were not accurate. Well, if you don't review those notes when they're made and you don't have somebody that's got the experience and the knowledge to look at it, and all of a sudden, say for example, you went ahead and archived it like you're supposed to, 2 years later, you could get called into an on-the-record testimony related to one of those notes, and they're going to go with what's in the notes. The regulators will. If you haven't looked at it, you haven't reviewed it, and you haven't made sure that that's accurate, all of a sudden, you're on the hook for something that may be totally fictitious.
Correct.
That's a problem.
Yes, it is. And, again, if I think about analogies, right? If you look at the healthcare industry and you look at what's happening with a lot of hospital networks, you've got doctors, but a lot of hospital networks are now, staffing up their surgery centers or their clinics with physicians assistants, right? And there's a ratio between physicians assistants and doctors. So instead of hiring 8 doctors, you maybe hire 15 physician's assistants and 2 doctors, right? You change the ratio, and you try to build the healthcare model that way by dropping costs. It doesn't absolve the industry from having 2 doctors, right? You still need
Right.
2 doctors. You don't have physician's assistants driving the room, right? Or you walk into a cardiologist's office and they take your EKG report and they feed it into an AI model, and the AI model spits out a report and says, yeah, you've got AFib, but you're not going to take that and submit that directly to the insurance company. You're going to have a cardiologist bless that result, and you submit both reports. And in many cases, you have the doctor disagreeing with what's happening out of AI, and both are submitted. And somebody on the other side decides, okay, how do we lend an opinion on this? And I think that's the exciting sort of age that I think we're now going to be living in, particularly for this, where you've got, replace physician's assistants with an AI bot that's doing a certain task or a set of tasks, but then you still have the doctor, and you've got a credentialed individual. And so I think I stand corrected earlier. It's not human AI, it's expert-led AI. And I think the credentialed expert, you can't just have just any human looking at AI output. It has to be an expert. It has to be an AI that's credentialed, or it has to be a human that's credentialed, that's looking at the AI output that could lend an opinion. That makes
Right.
sense.
They've got to be qualified. They've got to be knowledgeable, and they've got to understand what it is they're looking at.
Yep. Perfect. So we are almost out of time. So let's move into the Q&A session. Let me see what questions we have already received from the audience. Give me 1 second. Okay. Looking forward, how do you expect regulators' posture toward AI in compliance to evolve over the next few years? I think that would be good for you, Jeff.
Yeah, so my prediction is that it's gonna be slow for a little bit, particularly as the SEC comes to grips with the new administration. The SEC held a roundtable in March on AI, and they just in August created an AI task force to study its own use of AI and its regulation. But I think there's going to come an inflection point, maybe sometime next year, where things are going to start to accelerate. And again, I follow the crypto model where for a while crypto was out there, it really wasn't taking hold, and all of a sudden now, we're in a crypto society. So I think continue to be slow, and then it's going to accelerate.
Anything else from Mimi or Sid?
Okay, so I'm going to throw a wild prediction out there, and I don't know the answer to this, whether it's going to be 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, right? But again, Jeff, if I use your words as inspiration on this, with crypto being an interesting example, part of the biggest sort of disruption that crypto brought was this notion of a decentralized model, as opposed to a centralized model for, let's call it currency or what have you, right? A digital asset based on blockchain. I wonder if compliance and regulation, the regulatory bodies, are going to adopt a decentralized model or some sort of a hybrid model where things can be validated through what people do. If you go and sort of dig deeper into how crypto works, there's this notion of a distributed ledger where every sort of node submits what it's done and it gets validated by the next node, and then by the next node, and then by the next node. So it's this sort of collective intelligence that vets out any given submission into the network. I wonder, this is just a thought, would we have a distributed ledger model for compliance? Or is it always going to be a centralized authority like an SEC or a FINRA validating whether something passes muster or not? So at some point, I think there could be a blockchain-based SEC model, a blockchain-based FINRA model. I'm just throwing this out there. I mean, this is a wild prediction, because as we see on the front end, where you're using AI to do a lot of the interesting compliance work, again, blessed by an expert, right? I wonder if there could be a model on the other side where the submissions are being validated using a distributed peer network type of a compliance model. It's just a thought, just a thought. But I think, back on reality, right? I think before all of this happens, we get carried away by that. I think there's going to be a lot of, and I think, Jeff, you probably have more knowledge in this area, but I think AI washing is going to be the biggest threat vector in the short term from a regulatory standpoint. It's people overusing AI or overplaying their use of AI for whatever tasks that they're using. I'd see that if there was an area in which regulatory bodies are going to be looking at it, I think it's going to be that, and that's going to put pressure on vendor management frameworks and how you vet AI use. That's my prediction.
I can see it happening.
Yeah.
Excellent. Go ahead, Mimi.
Oh, I was just going to say again, as far as the future is concerned, it's exciting where we're at right now. And just to think that where we'll be in 5 or 10 years and the paradigm shift that we're going through as an industry, it's kind of like when we went from mainframe computers to laptops and Apple IIe's. You had people that were jumping in the very beginning, and you had others that were still using their Texas Instruments calculator and a legal pad because they were slow adopters. But I think ultimately you are going to have to learn to use this tool. It's not something that you're going to be able to ignore. I don't think that AI is going to be a passing phase, if you will. I think it's definitely here to stay, and I think firms just need to really think about and be thoughtful about how they employ this new tool and what type of policies and procedures and safeguards they put around it, because ultimately the output they're responsible for. So whether it's creating marketing materials for them, they're responsible for what they put out there. They can't say, well, AI did it and therefore that's not on me. It doesn't work that way from a regulatory standpoint. If you use it, you're responsible for it.
Yeah,
No
I mean,
different than using a computer to create something. You can't say Dell did the ads, and so therefore I'm not responsible. But
yeah, I mean, the use of web, the people moving from some mainframes to personal computers, the web transition, people using the internet,
exactly.
then the iPhone, the use of the iPhone, when
Yep.
people were stuck with the BlackBerry generation or the Palm Pilot generation and the move to the iPhone and the consolidated device, or the cloud, where people are moving
Exactly.
away from hosting all their data in a server in their back office, in their closet, to going to trusting somebody in the cloud. And so we're seeing that. I mean, I think those
Yeah,
transitions are happening and the industry adopts. I agree.
absolutely.
Perfect. So we're out of time now. For everyone else who submitted questions, we will reach out to you and we'll respond to those personally. So a big thank you to Sid, Mimi, and Jeff for the great discussion. Really appreciate it. And to all of you for joining us. Any closing remarks?
Well, thank you for hosting this, Jorge. It's always exciting to talk about this. I think the best is yet to come here. So I appreciate your time and all the panelists.
Yes. And thank you, Jorge, too. I've enjoyed this, and Sid as well, and Jeff.
Yeah, very, very stimulating. Thanks, Mimi and Sid, for giving a lot of food for thought.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Well, we hope this session gave you a clear picture of how regulators are thinking about AI in 2025 and what practical steps your firms can take to stay compliant while leveraging the new technology. So to learn more about SurgeONE's approach to combining AI with expert guidance, please visit SurgeONE.ai. A replay for the webinar will be shared with all the registrants. So please feel free to revisit it again or share it with your team. And thanks again for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.